This is the Partner for Leads podcast for small business owners, entrepreneurs, and sales pros. It's a podcast for those of you who want to build your business in a smarter, relationships-first way. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1. I'm your host, Roberto Hernandez. The intro music you are hearing was composed and performed by my good friend and former bandmate, Frank Salazar. This is the first episode of 2019 for the podcast, but if my records serve me correct, my guest, Dave Hamilton, and I had this conversation back on the 15th of November, and here I am just now getting around to recording this setup intro for you. Dave and I have some things in common, including both being drummers and podcasters, and I think he's a singer too. I think we have that in common as well. There's a lot of other stuff in common, but he's been in podcasting since the dawn of podcasting, in fact. We don't have that in common. He's also been into all things Mac and online advertising related services since what I kind of think of as their dawn. I make him sound old, but he's not. I'm pretty sure he's younger than me, and I'm pretty sure he has a lot less gray hair than me, too, which at least makes him look younger than me, whether he is or not. But I'm pretty sure he is. I asked him to speak with me largely out of curiosity about his business. He does a great job of explaining the evolution of his business and also his personal evolution as a business owner, manager, a podcast producer, sales guy, and employer. We also talk about growth and change in his business. And frankly, I don't know how we squeezed all this stuff in. It was a fun conversation. I think you're going to find it an insightful one and an educational one. All right, here's me and Dave Hamilton. I was going to start with something that I thought sounded funny, at least in my head. And I know these aren't the actual numbers, but it sounds great. 2 companies, 2 podcasts, 2 bands, 2 kids. How in the hell do you do it?
With 2 Daves. That's how it's done, man. No, I wish I could clone myself. I thought about that a long time ago. And that's a difficult thing for a productive person that is also a small business owner to grapple with, right? Is you know that you need to, at some point, but in most businesses, maybe not all, but in a lot of businesses, at some point, you need to delegate some of the things you do to someone else, right? And that's a really hard thing when you are convinced that, and your clients convince you that you do everything really well. That's a dangerous thing because there are only so many hours in the day, and you can't do it all the time forever, especially if you want to grow. So yeah, the answer is hire more people that are different. But that's because you cannot hire more people that are the same. So you have to hire people that are different.
Sure, and you want them to complement your own superpowers. Do you find
that's the
yourself
idea
over the years being better at delegating, or you still beat yourself up about that?
Man, I've actually gotten worse at it over the years. I get better and worse. It's an ebb and flow thing. Although maybe if I was able to look at it objectively over the span of time all at once, which our feeble human minds are unable to do, we have to perceive time linearly, even though that's crazy. But anyway, that's for a different podcast. Maybe I would say that I've gotten better over the years, but I feel like I get better and then I get worse. And what'll happen is I'll have someone doing something for me that's doing it well, and then I think they're doing it well, and then I dig back in and realize, oh, holy crap, they're not doing it that well at all. And then, okay, I better do this again, and so that's when I get worse, and it's like, oh, forget it, no employees. And people listening, don't worry, like any current employees we have, we're not considering letting anybody go or anything like that. But like, I always have to say that, because I know that the people that work with us listen and think, uh-oh, is he talking out of school? Yes, maybe, but I'm talking out of school from things that would have happened like 5 years ago. So we're all, everything current is good. But
that's great. I hope they all listen, just for listener growth myself, but
yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, so 2018, we're recording this before the end of the year, even though it's coming out after the end of the year, but that's okay. 2018 was a very interesting year for me and for the companies. We lost a few long-term employees that just moved on, and it's actually all very good, and it's good for them. And now I'm realizing is good for us. At the times when I realized these people were leaving, it was sort of with one of them especially, it was a shock. There was an episode I did on the Small Business Show about how I know I'm not supposed to be surprised when somebody says I quit, but and yet I'm also human, and so sometimes that happens. But when you have detached from something for a long time that's happening under your purview, and then you dig back into it, you start to realize, wow, I don't like to say things were on autopilot, but they're in someone else's, somebody else was the captain of these things. Right. And so they, not necessarily that they were ignoring it, but they were taking care of it. So they were doing it in their own way. And that's an interesting thing. That's great in the short term, but in the long term, you really need to, as a manager, figure out, and as a business owner, figure out how to routinely engage, not so that you can micromanage. And this is my issue, is I am a terrible micromanager, so much so that I tell every single person that I hire, if I get to the point where I feel like I have to micromanage you, I'm just going to let you go, because neither one of us wants that. So the way to solve that is to, do your job well. If you have questions, ask me before I have to realize you're having trouble, that sort of thing, so that we build trust, right? Normal stuff. I try to be self-aware. And so I, tell people these things up front, and it's usually really helpful. But what that creates with me anyway, is a scenario where people will get, they'll be doing their job well, they'll get comfortable with it. And then it's like, okay, great. So-and-so has that covered. And then when I finally dig back in, because I have to, it's like, oh man, if I had known this was how it was going, we would have made some other changes. Like, and it's perhaps the way to simplify what I'm trying to say is employees or the people that you delegate things to don't necessarily have all the same information that you do. It's not that they are incapable of seeing the big picture. It's that they may not have all the information to see the big picture. And even if they do see it, they're not going to see it the same way you do, right? You're just different people. And so one of my flaws is I always assume people are going to see things the same way I do. And I know that's crazy when I say it out loud. Of course people aren't. But, you're just like, oh, well, this is obvious, so it must be obvious to everyone. No. What's obvious to one person isn't necessarily obvious to the other. And it doesn't mean that one person's smarter or one person's stupider. It just means that we're different, right?
Yeah.
So I need to find a way to dig in while someone is still doing a job without making me or them, but me more importantly, feel like I'm micromanaging them.
I get that.
And that, you know what I mean? So that we can evolve the position and evolve the job without changing the person that's doing the job. And that's a difficult thing from both sides, right? Because I don't want to micromanage, but also if you're doing something and I step in and say, hey, change what you're doing, like that feels like I'm telling you you're doing it wrong. It's like, well, this isn't a personal attack, right? It's a procedural change. Well, it's in the delivery, but it's also in the corporate culture, right?
Sure.
If you make your business embrace a culture of change, I think that's a helpful thing. Of course, that's a scary thing too, especially for someone who is coming to work for you and relying on a paycheck from you and all of those things. So it's really it's difficult. It's just the reality of it. I have no idea if that's the answer, if that's the question you wanted me to answer, but I appreciate you letting me lay on the couch and therapize a little bit here. So there we go.
Well, in today's work economy and changing work economy, I would think that it's probably a good barometer for hiring people to find people that are like, sure, I understand things are going to change. They always are. They're going to continue to. You reminded me that I wish I was better at remembering the titles of books that I'm reading. Some of them I will, but I'll put it in the show notes and even send it to you if you like. But there's a book I'm reading on questions and asking and the importance thereof. And I was reminded of the 5-question methodology that is accredited to the founder of Toyota, the car company, where when things went wrong, they made it a corporate culture to just dig in and to ask, 5 levels deep, basically, why did this happen? Oh, well, why do we think it was because of that? Why did that occur? And they would go down 5 levels. And so in reading a little further, I find that a lot of people in our world will not always be aware that they're doing that, but they might even go just 3 levels deep to sort of dig down as hard as they can to figure out so they start figuring out where the processes break down. But
sure,
I was thinking I wanted to, I was going to say this is probably a great opportunity for that, but also why early on in the response, I wanted to ask, why do you think when you do think you've gotten worse at delegating, what is it that makes you feel that way?
Well, it's that when I dig back in, I realize how there is a part of me that's happy to be able to just do what I want to do without having to be concerned with how is this procedural change going to impact that human that I need to do this procedural change, or embrace this procedural change. So it takes the wetware out of it, right? There's no politicking or anything like that. There's just no people management that has to be done when it's like, oh, well, now we'll do it this way. Cool. Well, there's nobody to complain about that. Great, let's go. The flip side, of course, is there's no one to provide input that says, hey, that's cool, but maybe let's try this, and that, that's the double-edged sword.
Sure.
Every time that I've dug in on something, things generally get better. Things get more automated. Things get more efficient. I'm really focused on being efficient and really focused on automating things to get there. So I'll give you a great example. When we started the Mac Observer 20 years ago, my partner, Brian Chaffin, who's still my partner there, he was in charge of all the content. I was in charge of the tech side, the servers, the business side, all that stuff. So he was publishing the content every day. And I knew he had some system, but I didn't really care. The content got up, and that's what was important. Division of labor, perfect. Then we got to a point where it was almost this time of year. My daughter was born in early December, and we decided that I would not go to our big trade show of the year, which was Macworld Expo. We always needed someone to stay back and publish the site. It wasn't something we could do in a mobile sense like you could now. So it was like, I'll stay home. She was just born. That way I won't go to the show. I won't be away from my, growing family here. You get to go, and I'll publish the site. Great. So mid-December or whatever, I went over to his house. We each worked at our own homes. We had offices in our homes. And we got together, and he showed me what he did. And it was this massively inefficient process from my perspective that involved many, many, many opportunities for human error in things that could be automated. Like, for example, when we published a new article, we would put the article up, and then we'd have to go to all the other articles and update the links at the bottom of them that, link to our 10 most recent headlines, right? Sure. And then we'd have to re-upload the entire site. And I'm like, oh my God. And it was manual. You had to create, you had to go in and add a new, a new line, delete the bottom line, add a new line at the top, type in the title, make it a link, put the link in. And it was just so many opportunities for human error, in addition to it just being massively inefficient. And I'm a programmer, and so I was like, well, I'm not going to run the site this way. There's no way. Now I see what we're doing. Cool. I can automate this. So I spent the week between Christmas and New Year's coding what was our first content management system, perhaps one of the first content management systems ever. I don't know. There was no WordPress to download and install. Yeah. So I wrote my own, right? And the business got so much more efficient because of that, right? And so I like to do things like that where I can see a process, get in, fix it, and then, hand it off so people can use it. And then, again, down the road, dive back in and fix it. I like to fix problems, right? Especially when it comes to computers and in general, I'm I'm a good troubleshooter. I'm a patient troubleshooter, and I'm pretty good at coming up with solutions. Mine aren't necessarily the best. There's always alternatives, but I can come up with stuff and solve things, especially stuff like that. And everything in these days involves that. It doesn't matter whether you're publishing content, if you're doing sales. Like, there's just so many things that can be automated, and it's hard for me. For example, with salespeople, right? In theory, you don't need to be a tech wizard to be a salesperson. Like that's tech, crazy. Right? Yeah. Even though you're selling things in tech, right? You don't need to be a wizard. You need to understand the products, but you don't need to be able to program or create them, right? That's actually someone else's job. But without being, a programmer, you're not going to necessarily see opportunities for automation. You're not going to, right? Those types of things. So that's where it gets really interesting. Where I had a sales rep leave earlier in 2018, and at first that he was the one that surprised me when he left, and we went through all that, and it was fine. I mean, it worked out. I mean, we're still on very good terms and all that stuff. It was just a surprise that he said, "I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere else," and but having to dig in and do his job for a little while was like, oh, whoa. I can do this. Like, whoa, like think of all the opportunity we missed by not automating this, right? And was I frustrated at him? No, I didn't hire him to be a programmer, right? I can't blame him for not doing something that he simply did not have the skills to do. But I do, right? And so me doing that job plus bringing all my baggage with me, good and bad, lets me dig in and say, oh my gosh, and for the second half of the year, we did like 3 times the amount of business that we've ever done in a full year. And so it's like, wow. But that's the thing, right? Is I scratch my head and go, why didn't I do this 5 years ago?
Well, so 2019 is the year where you bring your people in to like invite them to let you look at process improvement opportunities then, right? I can't, and this is where I say I get worse as a delegator, right? Now you can understand why that's my perspective. Like, there's no way I'm going to let things just go. I know that when I dig in, it gets better, and it's basically been true every time. But I also know that part of the reason that's been true every time is because I'm not driving people crazy every day with it. If I was, it would make things worse, right? So I'm aware that what I'm saying isn't actually true, but there's got to be a better balance than that which I have been able to find in the past. And so there you go. Well, it sounds like in both cases that we talked about with automation, there was an opportunity for improvement, and in one case, arguably an opportunity for increased commissions for the salesperson. Revenue. So I suppose if you look at it that way, and I would think that staffers would see this as, oh, this is good, even though there is, of course, the fear, well, maybe he's going to automate my job. but that's very interesting.
I project, of course, as we all do, or at least as I do, I project myself into everybody else's mind, right? It's the only way I can try to predict what people are going to do. And so what I think is, the way I think of it is, if you're doing a job, there's all kinds of things that you have to do. And we all choose, and this is truly a sign of intelligence, right? And a sign of wisdom. We choose where to cut corners and where to really apply ourselves and dig in, right? That's the only way to really get ahead is you have to figure out, if you take the entirety of the things that you need to do and call that 100%, you're really only ever going to do like 82% of it. It's picking that 18% that you're leaving on the table is the key, right? And so if I am your boss and I am telling you, here's the 100% that I need you to do, you're picking 82% of that and you're doing a great job, right? Mm-hmm. Now I say, as your boss 6 months later, hey, I want to dig into every little thing you do all day long and figure out where we can find some efficiencies for you that's going to, double your revenue, double the company's revenue, double your salary, or double your commissions, whatever it is. Like, this is going to be a great thing. I have to assume that people say, well, crap, then he's going to realize I'm not doing that thing, or not doing that thing. And so that makes people uncomfortable when you say, hey, I want to look over your shoulder while you write an email, right? Like that's essentially what I would be asking, is not because I want to nitpick your grammar, although there's no way in the world that I wouldn't, because that's who I am, but that's the problem is if I'm coming to you and saying, hey, I'm a good nitpicker, so I'm going to spend a week with you and nitpick everything for the benefit of the company, that's a really hard pill to swallow, even if you understand why it's happening. So.
Well, this is really interesting because the same book I was mentioning a moment ago, I say it is. I think it is because I've gotten this new thing of bouncing between 3 books all at once. But
I do that too.
Yeah. I find it actually nicer for reading because I kind of sort of hit a bit of a mental wall occasionally with one book, and I find that switching to another one helps with that. But in the same book, they were talking about the advantage of getting outside of doing surveys and things of that nature and living with whomever is experiencing whatever they're experiencing. In the case of the passage I was reading in the book, it was in living in their area of challenge, be it one where they were trying to understand hospitals from the patient perspective, or why developing countries don't utilize medical equipment to the extent that you would think they would, but only by being in those situations did they really learn a lot. So what you're trying to do, but I think you're kind of, I understand, believe me, you're kind of
overthinking it.
Yeah, you're overthinking it, but at the same time, I think it's worth sharing that with the team that you have to set it all up. But I suppose with your peers as well there to help get them to help frame it in a way that your team would do good, because it seems like it would be a great thing to do on a recurring, regular basis for you. Before we run out of time,
I need to make it a part of the corporate culture. What I do.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So that it's not seen as this. Oh, is he doing this because he thinks I'm slacking off? Right? Like that needs to be not part of the thought process. It's just no. This is how we do things here. We just dig in. So yeah.
I would think it would be fun to just throw that out there. I know that you might be thinking, but then again, maybe they weren't, and then you've got them thinking about it. So that could be a loaded gun.
Yeah, it's a loaded gun. Yeah, exactly.
So
leading the witness.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got all these right, even though we talked about it before we virtually press record. But as far as your businesses, there's Mac Observer, BackBeat Media, some others that you have had and have maybe parted ways with your original co-founders for various reasons. And then you mentioned to me, and then there's podcasting, which I know contributes part of your revenue. And you're also, like me, a musician, and I'll call you a part-time pro because I know you couldn't possibly be full-time with all this other stuff you do. And that's also part of your joy, but albeit income at times. And then
absolutely,
you enlightened me to the fact that you historically have also had a consulting business fixing people's computers. The first question I wanted to ask is, and I would like to hear about the consulting gig fixing computers, because that is potentially very interesting, but I kind of wanted to know, in your mind, what is the flagship business, or what is the kind of the thing that either demands most of your attention, or is like this one is the most important because of maybe it's revenue or something else, but which one is, if there is one, which one of these things is kind of the flagship in your business world?
Yeah, that changes the flagship, and I have to be very aware of where I'm needed and where I can hand things off and that sort of thing. These days, the flagship business is without question BackBeat Media, which is the one that we spun off from Mac Observer a year into that business. That handles these days the bulk of what BackBeat Media does is selling and managing sponsorship relationships for a group of websites and podcasts. So we approach the sponsors, we present them with all the publishers that we have, we find the right places for each sponsor to spend their money, and then we manage that whole process. Then we do a revenue share with our publishers so that the publishers get to make some money and all of that stuff. So that is, there are a lot of people that rely on us with BackBeat Media, and these days that is the one that's taking up most of my time and effort in a good way. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I imagine I can see that has been hugely evolving as a business, given the amount of time that BackBeat has been in existence. What is the competitive landscape like, just out of my own curiosity, for that business?
Yeah, so we started that business because there was someone else doing the same thing. Obviously, 19 years ago, there were no podcasts to speak of, but it was all just websites. And we didn't like the way they were doing it, and so we started our own thing. To be perfectly frank, it's a more nuanced story than that, but that's the net of it. And so, yes, there always have been and always will be competitors, I think, in this business. We certainly are aware of what our competitors do. I think trying to spend your day competing with your competitors is probably a good way to not grow your business. Certainly being aware of them and letting things that they're doing that you want to do be an inspiration, but worrying about, are they making more money than us this year? Or, are we beating them? Like, that's great if it motivates you. But in terms of actually making decisions about what to do, you really just need to focus on who you have, who your customers are, who you want your customers to be. If there's a delta there, great. Well, now you know what to do tomorrow. No problem. And really focus on your own business. So there are plenty of competitors. I know most of them. We are actually quite friendly, and it all works out really well. But yeah.
I like that. I was sort of waiting for you to describe something that I came to know probably in, I don't know, around 2005, 6, 7, the world of, I don't even know I forget what it's called, but the world of advertising for sale on websites, and that has changed so much. But it didn't sound like a very pretty business. But what BackBeat does, I know you've been involved in a lot of that maybe, but it sounds like what you do is a friendlier environment.
Up until about 5 years ago, the bulk of our revenue was made on the web, and it's interesting. We went through a period where that shifted to podcasts, and I think we will end 2018 in a way where podcasts, and again, I know this is coming out after, but we're recording before, so temporal nature of things.
Thank you.
Yeah. I am pretty certain that we will have ended 2018 with podcasts bringing in more revenue than the web, but the web is growing again. And part of that is that there's, some renewed interest there, but the other part is there's renewed interest internally in making that more profitable and finding different ways of doing things. And it's like anything, you pay attention to it, that which is monitored is managed. And, so you focus your attention on something and magically it starts to improve. So it's
Isn't that
good.
The truth?
Yeah.
So yeah. I know about I want to ask you about one of your podcasts. I know about, maybe two. I know about GigGab, the working musicians podcast, although I have not made the time to listen to more recent episodes, so maybe it's evolved. But I am curious. I know less about the Small Biz Show, and funny, another couple things we have in common. We both have music podcasts for musicians. I'll be them a little bit from slightly different angles, and probably the same thing with our business podcast. And yours has certainly been in existence a much longer time than this Partner for Leads Biz podcast. So tell me about the Small Biz Show.
Yeah, so the Small Business Show, we started 4 years ago. When I say we, that's my co-host and business partner, Shannon Jean. He and I have been in other businesses together. We have also had other businesses apart. Every other business that I've mentioned, that we've mentioned in this episode, is something I do separately from Shannon. But he and I did have a business together called Deals on the Web years and years ago. That was a website focused on publishing deals every day, and we made money on advertising and affiliate revenue. And actually, it was a great business for a while until that market just sort of honestly, the market started to change. But really, what happened is we had somebody come in and try to, and there's a lesson here. Somebody came in that wanted to acquire us. A public company came in, and we walked all the way down the path, and we got within about a day of it closing. So we went through everything. The price was negotiated. Everything was on the table. Everybody knew everything. And then another deal appeared for them at basically the last day of the the period where either one of us could walk away, essentially. And it wasn't a competitive deal, except that it required all of the cash they had on hand. So they walked away from our deal, which, as I noted, they had the right to do, but it killed us. And the reason it killed us is because we had emotionally detached from this business that we were selling.
Wow.
We had gone through that, and it was like, how do we dive back in here? Even though we were still running it through the process, it was like, hey, cool, 3 months from now, this is not ours, that kind of thing. So we learned a lot there, and we've each taken those lessons with us, and then came back around. We've always stayed in touch. So the Small Business Show is our show, focused on, kind of like what you're doing here in a different way, focused on people that are actually there grinding it out every day, running a business, not the VC funded businesses where it's just, you're just burning somebody else's cash and that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, we found there was nobody catering to this audience of folks that are actually running, profitable, not necessarily sexy businesses, just the things that put money on the table, you know what I mean? And employ people. So we wanted to do that. We wanted to talk about that. We each learned quite a bit through our careers and wanted to start sharing some of that. And of course, as you know, by sharing things, you actually learn more and you get better at what you do. And that's certainly been true for, I think, both me and Shannon doing that show for the last 4 years. So.
That's good to hear. And I would hope, yes, I do have hopes for the same. And then is Mac Geek Gab, perhaps one of your oldest, longest running podcast, is that also the most successful in terms of, all the metrics that make podcasts successful?
All the metrics. Yeah, it really is. It's our largest one. It's our oldest one. It's our most lucrative podcast. It is, and it is a joy to do every week. It is, you talked about emotionally detaching from deals on the web. Mac Geek Gab is a business, and it's part of Mac Observer, but it is the part that I do on a regular basis. And it is, a business that I am very much emotionally attached to, in what I think is a good way. Yeah, it's great. It's great. We answer people's questions every week, right? People write in. It's like Car Talk for Apple users, if that reference lands, and if it doesn't, kids, ask your parents.
No, I think anyone who listens to podcasts has probably encountered someone who says, "Ask, so and so host," which is sort of the evolution of the Car Talk. Is that what it's called? Car Talk? Yeah. So we answer people's questions, and you mentioned, as I did, that I have a consulting business where I help people with their computers. Mm-hmm. When we started Mac Geek Gab 13 and a half years ago, I was transitioning from doing a lot of consulting to doing less consulting. And Mac Geek Gab really allowed me to continue to flex that part of my brain, helping people, answering questions, troubleshooting, that sort of thing, to really kind of keep me active there in that way without having to spend the time of leaving the office and going and helping people. I did find that I missed that, and I had a couple of Mac Geek Gab listeners 2 years ago, that really sort of convinced me to get back into consulting, largely because they needed help themselves. So this was, that's great.
Yeah. But it made me realize, when I go on site and I can go and I can interact with people, I really like, that human interaction. I'm good at it. I enjoy the customer service process of it all. And I really like, especially if I'm able to help people, which is the goal, and usually I am, not all the time. But, you get to the end of that appointment and you're Superman. You did something that these people could not fathom being able to do. And now not only have you fixed it, but you've explained to them how you fixed it and why, and they're better off for it. You're better off. It's like, it's a non-zero sum game. And that's what I'm always after, is it doesn't, in order for me to win, someone else doesn't have to lose. And that's what I love about
who is your atypical client for the computer consulting gig?
Well, it's been different over the years. These days, and I try not to overmarket myself because I really don't have the time, but I really like it. So I've been doing a lot I've got some clients that are Mac Geek Gab listeners that I do remote work for, but for the local people here in my little town in New Hampshire, I will go and help people consolidate their photos libraries. That's been a really popular one lately.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I have like 16 different photos libraries and this iPhoto library and this one and then this folder of things, and I just want to put it all in iCloud. It's like, yep, okay, cool. Like let's do this together and let's manage it, or it might be their wireless isn't working well in their house, and it's like, okay, cool. Well, let's come up with a good solution for you, and let's get the right thing so that when you go to that bedroom in the back, you still have plenty of coverage and plenty of speed, and you're not fighting with it. And I love doing stuff like that. It's fun. It's fun.
So a lot of
hands-on.
A lot of what's the term? I haven't heard it in a while, but Soho. Small, what is it? Small office, home office,
small office, home office. Yeah. And even just, non-office people too, just people in their homes. But yes, lots of Soho type of stuff as well. Yeah.
That is really interesting to me because, and maybe it's a great place to close too, but perhaps it brings you a nice, balance to the rest of your work, which is, working with companies, and
correct.
A lot of professionals, and maybe like music, which I know you probably are on both sides of the court, the proverbial court with music too, where you're doing things for, more in one-on-one type of transactional things versus maybe some sort of corporate or theater gig or something like that.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The nice part about consulting is it humbles me. And I know this sounds weird from the guy that just said, and at the end, I'm a Superman, but it's humbling in that it reminds me that I am here helping you. You are, ostensibly, hopefully it all works out, you're going to pay me for this service. I am here to serve you, right? It reminding myself of that balance and that dynamic is a really good thing for all my other businesses, because certainly that's true of all my other customers, and our publishers are also our customers, right? With BackBeat Media, but so are our sponsors and all of that stuff. And it's really easy to get caught up in, because it's so much of an email business, it's easy to get caught up in the I'm more important than everybody else mindset, right? Like, this is my desk, everything funnels through it. It's all happening at my pace because we're doing it via email. But everybody thinks that way. That's not actually true. It's just, the perspective. And it's when you get that FaceTime with people and you're there, and yes, maybe there's a problem and things go a little sideways and you're like, oh, yep. Sometimes you have to apologize, or sometimes you have to say, oh, I don't know the answer to that, and things like that. So it really does provide that perspective and humility that really is helpful for me, in addition to feeling like Superman. So, it's at both ends of the spectrum.
I can see that. Well, I know I'll have a follow-up question or two for you, and if you have time, it'll be great to hear or read your responses to that. And I really appreciate you spending time with me today. I think there'll be a lot of cool lessons and takeaways from this episode when it does publish. So I know I'll be talking to you soon as well. And I was going to mention that you were mentioning the humbling aspect and being face-to-face with people. I've been quoting you quite a bit lately, and I should probably say it in a way that would make me laugh a little bit in my own head. As my friend Super Dave Hamilton says, human contact is a good thing.
Human contact is a good thing. Yeah, it is. It's a Tim Street, who I don't know which company he's with right now. He's moved around, but longtime podcaster. He created a thing called French Maid TV 14 years ago, which had these women dressed up like French maids, explaining how to do like technical things like merging iPhotos libraries. I mean, that wasn't one of them because that didn't exist 14 years ago, but this was a thing. It. Yeah. He did fairly well with that, as you might imagine. But I always run into him at these trade shows, even stuff that's just remotely relevant to our business and our industry. And he's like, yeah, man. He's like, you're always here too. I'm like, wow, it's good to see people. He's like, and he said something to me a long time ago that really sits with me. And he says, well, this is a full contact sport. And I'm like, yeah. So there you go.
I like that expression. Dave, thanks again. I know you have somewhere to be or something to do, but
I'm sure
I'll be touching base with you in a couple of weeks, I guess, if not sooner.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Roberto. I'm honored to be here. It makes me feel like Superman.
You are in my book. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard today, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And if you have a couple of extra minutes, please leave a review. It helps this podcast, and more importantly, it'll help other small businesses and entrepreneurs find the podcast so that they too can learn from the trial and error, the expertise, the insights of successful business owners like you. Are you struggling to get the word out about your business? Struggling to get in front of the right prospects at the right time? Head over to partnerforleads.blog to join our community. As a member, you'll get an occasional email from me with tips, hacks, stuff I'm learning from guests of this podcast. This is all stuff you can use to grow your business. It's free, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Ciao for now.